All right. Wasn't that an exciting morning? Did everybody enjoy that? I did. I know I'm going to be thinking a lot differently about a lot of things, especially biology, which I don't think about that much. But fantastic. So who's ready for another 3 great speakers to finish off this day? You guys ready? Great. I'm really excited about this next speaker. Patrick Kalaher leads global tech strategy for Frog, making sure its clients are able to derive competitive advantage from their technology investments. His team in the US, Europe, and Asia have helped leading telecom, utility, pharmaceutical, retail, and consumer product firms drive transformation and strategic product development from the executive suite down to operations. A systems architect by training, Kalaher's experience spans connected products, cloud computing, enterprise-wide SOA, large-scale internet and IoT architecture, as well as product ideation, product strategy, and implementation. As a creative leader, there is nothing I personally admire and respect more than great insight and strategy. It is my great pleasure to bring to the stage Patrick Kalaher. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. All right, guys, before we get started, there we go. The topic for today is humans or machines. So by show of hands, who's on team human? Okay, put your hands down. Who's on team machine? Okay, people with your hands up now. Are you assuming that they're going to make us into batteries or use us as sources of cheap meat? All right, don't answer that question. We'll get to that later. This talk was spurred by a healthy curiosity in the work that we're doing all around the world, where the advancement of the systems level design that we're doing at Frog and with our clients has started to prompt really important existential questions about what this change implies. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you at the beginning here, that I believe that the future lies with humans and machines. And I think that humans and machines can bring the best out in each other, but it isn't going to happen all by itself. It's going to be a thing that happens because we use human-centered design in a very careful and thoughtful way. Okay? So if you take one point away from today, it's this. But first, I think we have to tap the conventional wisdom. It's always really important to go out and see what people are saying and doing. And so, right, if you ask anybody on the street, machines are coming after us. It's the Matrix. It's all sorts of things. You guys may have seen this video. Right? Here's the trope. The trope is that horses thought that they were at the top of their economic pyramid. They thought that they would never, be made obsolete. Cars didn't seem like they were threatening them. We replaced them entirely. We now have robots that make cars. We don't even have auto workers. And then on the right-hand side, we now have computers that can write software that can write other software. We're going to be completely obsolete. Why do we even do this? Bill Joy, lots of other people, Ray Kurzweil, they say this sort of thing. Well, I have to say, my experience is that there's really 3 myths that underpin this, right? And these are, first of all, the myth of replacement, the idea that computers, robots, programs, they just replace a person. Second of all, the idea, and you're designers and you're architects and so on, you already know that linear progress is not a thing, right? That it looks like that in retrospect, and you can draw a through line through that. But then the final thing is the one that I'm here to really challenge today, which is this idea that full autonomy is really where we're going. It's like the Cylons in Battlestar Galactica, right? This is the way we're headed. Well, I don't think so. And I'm going to pick some easy targets first, but hopefully you guys will go along with me here. Who's familiar with Tay? Right? I know. Maybe Tay for president. I think she might win, especially lately. Things like Tay are really great experiments. There's an enormous amount of experience in machine learning and lots of very advanced AI behind her. But of course, after 12 hours on Twitter, she became just like the rest of us. But she's, I'm gendering her here, but she's indicative of a lot of things, a lot of investments that are being made at a number of different scales. One of the reasons why we've been hearing so much about robots in industrial uses is that the government of China has made a mandate that they want to use that as a way to replace the retiring workers, right? 77 different cities in China have it, there's their top priority. They've actually been, in the last 5 years, been the purchasers of the majority of the industrial robots in the world. You may have heard about Foxconn getting rid of a bunch of workers. It's actually not true. When it comes to expert systems, this is something that my friend at Frog, Charlie Burgoyne, put together, and I love this, right? We all love the idea of moving in data-driven systems, big data systems. We go from descriptive through predictive and adaptive to intelligent systems. And we all love this idea. And if you think about it in terms of 3 curves, the potential value of that grows pretty fast. But we also know that the complexity of pulling that off from a design and system architecture perspective grows as well. And then there's a thing that Charlie and I call appositeness, which is like efficacy, the fact that the chances of, on any given day, the system working the way it's supposed to. And our experience has told us that it's actually where we should be looking and where we've got best luck is in the sweet spot, which, not a big surprise here, is in adaptive experiences with humans in the loop from design through execution and interpretation and redesign. And finally, I said there's been a lot of, I'm just going to, by the way, the rest of the talk is we're just going to watch this. I know I really want him to make it, but he doesn't do it. Think about this. The people who made this are incredibly skilled, fantastically talented, and it still doesn't quite do it. It's a little bit like the American men's soccer team. By the way, this guy just missed the cut. I know. So what will machines do? Let's take a look at that and just talk about that for a second, right? One of the first things I like to do is look at the numbers. And this is a McKinsey study. It's one of a couple that are kind of in line with some reasonable thinking. And they looked at 18 different categories of job, and they said, how many of these things can be fully automated? It turns out that's a little wedge up there, it's 5%. The big area there, it's about 60%, can be about 30% automated, maybe. And then the rest can't be significantly automated. And that tells us some things, but it doesn't tell us a lot of other things. There's been 3 or 4 studies that have confirmed this. When you flip to an activity view of this, where you look at how the activities that make up those jobs are today, it's interesting, and you guys as designers will appreciate this, that only about 33%, the green and blue part, or really only about 32%, are actually about human sensing and emotion and about creativity. So I, for one, am kind of excited about automating a larger piece of the stack. And this McKinsey study says that probably about 45% of these activities may be automated in total. And the thesis is that this frees us up for higher level activities. One of the things they say is that CEOs could be up to 20% automated. I might argue higher. But here are the 4 takeaways I want from this one for you guys, right? Think about the fact that automation is not just automation for automation's sake. And I'm going to argue in a few seconds about the fact that our automation from a design perspective actually lowers cost and enables scale and enables systems that wouldn't otherwise work to actually be effective. Another thing that you're going to hear in the next few minutes is that automation requires a lot more monitoring. And for those of you who've made complicated systems, monitoring is a kiss of death. Nobody wants to monitor things. It's really bad. People don't like it. This opportunity for redesign services actually lets us enable human orientation, which is something I'm going to argue for here. So let's step back and take a look at those for a second, right? And I think these make intuitive sense, but task-oriented systems automation doesn't seem like it does much at first, right? David Nordfors had this great quote that said, in a task-oriented perspective, even a dishwasher passes the Turing test. This is why you don't see too many smart dishwashers out there. But really, automation has been a real engine of growth and scalability. Something from the 19th century, and this is the case of the original Luddites, is this idea that automation of the textile business, actually, if you kind of follow the causation here, even though it required fewer workers per machine, it actually created more material, drove down the cost of production, created more demand. And then by the end of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century, there were actually many, many more people in the textile business. So that's scaling up. Right? I also want to argue scaling down, and I was glad to see the people from Perennial talking this morning. I thought it was fantastic. This is maybe one of the secret weapons that they had. Do you guys know what this is? Has anyone seen this before? This is a robot from a company called ROW Robot, and it replaces a device that's 61 rows wide. And it's 1 row wide, and it's essentially a farming drone. And what it does is it does things like weeding, it does planting, it does sensing of nitrogen levels. It can seed different things in different rows. It can basically prune and maintain. Whereas you used to have to farm in big in enormous swaths of monoculture. Now you're going to be able to do things like putting in mixed crops, and you're going to be able to buy these things if you want or rent them, right? And so I'm talking to people from Salesforce. This is robots as a service, right? This is the robot cloud. I think you guys should, I don't know how you make that one of the clouds, but I think you should do. But what this ends up doing is creates diversified businesses that lower risk for farmers. What do we hear about them in the fragility of their business? And the smaller scale is going to make farming more effective in multiple different places. All right, so I want to say a few words about being human-oriented, because we're going to go into that later on, but the whole point of being human-oriented is to develop a higher, richer relationship with whoever the participants are. And I'm actually going to use an example that seems pretty quotidian, it seems kind of boring, but I can't think of much in the 20th century that changed our lives more than ATM machines. And until I really looked at this closely, I didn't think about just how much the architecture of these things has really changed. So when ATMs were introduced in the 60s and 70s, everyone thought, okay, they're just going to fire all the tellers. Well, they didn't. What they ended up doing was tellers stopped doing things like counting money and giving and cashing your paycheck and your granny going in and checking her balance. That all became an automated function. And what they started to do was do higher value interactions. They actually started to talk to people more about more interesting products, et cetera. And for retail banks, that's an important thing. And the newest thing, and the picture I have here, is this idea that in many different small towns, it's not cost effective to put branches with tellers, but with telepresence, they can do that. And so you can actually have a much more interesting set of interactions, and you guys are all about that, right? Much more interesting set of interactions with somebody through this infrastructure and make it much more human-oriented. So what started as automation became something different. So let's take a step back and understand what machines and humans need to be good at, right? Don't be fooled. These are ramen robots in China. Don't be fooled by them. They look awesome. What they're really doing, guys, is they're really doing something very formulaic, very simple, something that most cooks would not want to do. It's a human-designed system. It's extremely controlled. I could watch this all day, but I won't. But when you think about what humans are good at that robots are not good at, it's things like this, seeing the world the way we do. And I thought of what's the least glamorous, most demeaning thing in the world, and I guarantee everybody in this room has done it. It's putting together IKEA furniture, right? And so these are researchers in Singapore who are taking high-end industrial robots and teaching them in real time to put together. Yeah, I know, right? I know. It's going to get there. It's going to get there. And I want to go quickly here. So she makes it. But if you're gonna go and buy a couple $50,000 robots and they're gonna act like your drunk uncle, right? All right. We're just gonna right. Okay. Do it. Go. Yes. All right. And that's just one. But if you're gonna get somebody to be your drunk uncle, I know a much cheaper way. You can go and get some boxed wine and get your uncle to come over and put together your IKEA for you. It'd be much faster. But here's an interesting way where we can both help each other, machines and humans. I love this example where machine vision and being able, as we just saw, machine vision is a hard thing to do, and nobody wants to put their hand in a bucket of sharps. And so here's a small scale example from this company called Jod1, where essentially what they do is a person goes and identifies the dangerous medical waste, and the machine just goes and gets it. Maybe this is a transitional step because at some point, the machine will learn enough about what's actual medical waste and what isn't. One of the interesting things you also avoid with an approach like this is some human having to go and just watch it and make sure the machine's not making any mistakes and medical waste isn't getting into a recycling stream, right? Which, most automation like this actually, when it's done wrong, actually creates more overhead than it solves. So I'll just go, I'm running quick on time here, so we'll do really fast here. One of the new skills that's emerging, if you look in the left-hand side here, the number of devices per person, Mark Ralston talked about this morning. Herding devices and managing devices and doing all that is actually a thing that we do really well and machines are not good at. I love Moravec's paradox, the paraphrase of which is on the left there, on your right, which is that things that we've known how to do for billions of years are super hard to program into computers. Things that we've learned in the last 200-300 years, like playing chess, are super easy, relatively speaking, right? And that's an interesting thing to look at. So I just wanted to summarize what we're good at and what computers are good at by looking at, machines are good at, by sort of in the middle in the gray is sort of the standard computer science version of this, right? And you can see the different types of reasoning that we're good at and so on and so forth. But I think there's a lot of really great qualitative design stuff on the outside. Like, for example, we're good at calling bullshit. As I said, we're good at robot farming. We're good at working with people, right? But we have a limited capacity. One of the great things about machines is they can sit idle. They can be somewhere. They can be in a cold place. They can do dangerous things, and they have unlimited capacity. But the thing I want you to remember is that we're actually pretty good at doing things for each other. OK, so I'm going to put all the designers I work with at Frog threw up on this slide. I make no apologies. It's a framework for thinking about these things, and it's important. You can organize this in a number of different ways. And what I've done here is, down the left-hand side here are different ways that we work together with machines, and on the top, going left to right, is sort of the level of automation. And to some degree, you could argue whether every interaction with a machine implies some kind of automation. I'm going to do that right now. The three I want you to notice here is that on the very left-hand side, we have this thing called level 0, which is things that are invisible. Power steering, power brakes. These were actually things people used to charge for. Now they're actually free. And as you go over towards the right, you get these increasing levels. This is based on the NHTSA automation levels for cars. Has anyone heard of these things? Essentially, right. So the idea here is that when people make systems like that, they fall somewhere along there. What's interesting is if you look at the example in the middle, the Tesla Autopilot, it's not clear where it goes. But what you start with is things that are function-specific at level 1, combined functions that sometimes take over the car a little bit, or the airplane or the robot a little bit, and then you then go to 3 and 4. And the vision we have for lots of different things is self-driving or self-powered. On the very, very right-hand side, we have what I call level N, which are all sorts of things from science fiction and fantasy, right? Like Mickey and his brooms from Fantasia. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you've got the different things that Tony Stark created, right? And HAL 9000. I also put in the middle here something interesting that I think we have all had some experience with, or at least many of us, which are generative design tools, right? Which sort of change the nature of what design is for people. And I'm going to talk about those in a minute. So why did I do that? Why did we go through that big, wordy slide? Because I want to look at categories of long-term risk that accrue from automation that actually impel lots of interesting design problems that you guys are going to solve. Okay? And there's 8 categories here, and I'll run them off quickly. You can read them as we go. There's the attention that we pay to the machines around us, the brittleness of what happens when the machine doesn't model the world accurately and starts doing stupid things like when GPSs don't know where they are. Poor feedback quality, when something beeps and you don't know why. Working context is an interesting one that comes out of aerospace, which is the idea when pilots go back into the cockpit and turn off the autopilot, they forget what they did. They also don't know the state of the plane. This is going to be a sort of thing that's in consumer products very soon if they're self-powered. Long-term skills are really important. What are the things you learn how to do over time and forget how to do? Your level of engagement. I mean, the easiest metaphor for this is leaning forward or leaning back. Morale. How do you feel about it? If it's something you're doing for a living, how do you feel when you're doing this? And then your career impact. What does it say about your job? I mean, think about all those people out there who are truck drivers, and they're wondering what their future is. So I'm going to arrange this in sort of an equalizer way, and the invisible technologies, they kind of sit around the middle, and the idea is that as these balls go up, they imply a certain amount of risk. I haven't scaled them for proportionality, but you get the basic idea. I drive an automatic, so I love the fact that that I don't have to switch gears, and the risk to my morale and my engagement goes down because I like driving more because I don't have to worry about burning out my clutch. When you start to think about function-specific automation, things like using a GPS or cruise control, exiting and entering those states is actually starts to become problematic from a design perspective. It's easier to kind of lose track of what's going on. right? You actually have to pay attention. I always forget when the cruise control is on or not, or the traction control is on or not. And this only gets more complicated if you look at the different colors of balls here. When we do combined function automation, and I'm going to give an example in a second, we really are vulnerable when we engage and disengage. But usually what these things are something that actually it provides a pretty crucial function or really adds value to the experience. But one of the problems that comes with these, if you see on your left here, is the idea that as you pay less and less attention to what's going on around you, as you lean back further, that creates all kinds of human design problems too. So this is something that a prototype we made. I love these. The idea that, and I live in Massachusetts, and 2 or 3 times a year there's black ice. It's famous because you can't see it. If my car could detect black ice and tell me to take my hands off the steering wheel for a minute to do that, that'd be fantastic. But here's a problem. Here's someone using Tesla's autopilot, following the truck in front of them in bad weather, and the instructions the autopilot has is to follow the truck in front at a fixed distance. But the autopilot doesn't know that there's a stack of traffic to the left. And only because the driver is watching that does he then know enough to speed past. And that's that exiting and entering that state that's a real problem. And I would actually ask the question whether or not Tesla should be building a system at that level, whether they should be even shooting that low. Maybe you should be shooting higher than that, to level 3. That has its own problems. It has the continuing problems that I talked about before, but one of the things you start to do now is you start saying, if this is something I do for a living, if I'm a machine operator or if I'm a pilot, what's my job now? Am I just a system admin? Am I just watching things? I think this is a really big problem. If the famous example from NASA is that most of the astronauts used to land on the moon manually, even though they had a system like this. And everyone thought it was because they were tough guys, but it's actually a really smart idea because they had a much better understanding of the entire state of the system. They understood exactly what was required, and if needed, say if someone had hurt their hand or if they were unconscious, they could have used the autopilot. But it's a great thing a great practice to have. Some people think that have you guys seen this? So this is a guy on 101 2 weeks ago sleeping in his car in traffic. Right? That's not what this is designed for, but it's also not. It doesn't stop you from doing this, right? This is a Tesla. The good news is that Google just filed a patent for some sort of Velcro-like material for their self-driving cars, so that when they hit bystanders, they will stick. I'm not making this up. So, and then the final thing I'll say here is if you look at full automation, the thing that we all dream about where we lean back and we say, I don't ever want to drive. I met with a CEO 2 weeks ago in the Valley, and he's like, I catch up on sleep in the back of my Uber. It'll be great when I don't have to have a driver. I was thinking like, oh man, does he know what I'm working on right now? So there's a bunch of questions around this that people like us need to solve. Here's the biggest one, right? The problem with these things is existential. The sorts of problems that happen, the brittleness and the problems with attention and the fact that sometimes when there's a problem, you have to take control immediately, these are the things that people want the least in these sorts of systems. And these are the problems that fall on us to solve. So let me quickly just go through what the answer is with human-centered design. Recognize our categories again, and I'm just going to hit on these really quickly. You can read the ones in the middle for yourself, but what I'll do for the sake of time is talk about the fact that a lot of this is about good user experience and UI development. Making things standard, that's a picture I took in Iceland. You know what that means even if you don't speak Icelandic. In the middle one here, this is around what I call watch the human, help the human. 250,000 people die every year in the United States because of medical mistakes. Can't tell me that if we had a system designed by one of us in this room that was watching medical practitioners and just making sure they were doing a little bit better, that number wouldn't go down dramatically. Doctors, when they're not being watched, wash their hands 22% of the time, and when they know someone's watching, they wash them 68% of the time. And then the final one here is the precautionary principle, and I use a slightly different version of this. If you've seen Fantasia, Mickey makes the mops go around to clean up, and then it goes out of control. And with these autonomous systems, it's really there's a danger that we're doing this. What we need to do is remember that Mickey had a wizard that came home and turned everything off for him, and we don't. We have to design systems that have that capability. And then the last couple things here, HAL is a great example. When the machine starts to really be different than when it starts to understand its mission and the world very differently than you, how do you know? How can you be sure? How can you monitor dissonance and aberrance? We already have things like Waze that use the wisdom of the herd, but the sort of use of longitudinal data is a really great way to ensure that our systems are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then a big thing to take out of this is that simulation turns out that's really important. It's never in anybody's minimum viable product. It's never in the sets of hero use cases, but it should be. Because when you're running autonomous systems, or as they become more autonomous, this ability to understand rare and unusual events turns out to be the difference between safety and danger. These are really, really hard problems. And then the final two things, I mentioned earlier that it's a well-known fact in the history of user experience that people hate monitoring things. I used to be in IT. I hate monitoring things. Most of these systems, as they become more and more autonomous, they start to become a system admin. If you start doing that, you've lost. And then the last one here is, if it's about the job and if it's about an existential threat to a job, redesign it. I don't know if you guys have seen this one. This is from Airbus and Autodesk, and the idea was these are some generative design tools that essentially kind of automated the creation of a partition at a mechanical level, but then freed the designer up to start thinking about what they're going to do with these things, right? So they spent several hundred hours fewer on making sure it had the right strength, and they could start to think about other things, right? But it involves a redesign and an up-leveling the skills that we have. So that about wraps it up. I think humans and machines can work well together, but we have to use human-centered design to make this happen, and you guys are the ones to do it. Thank you.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Come on over, have a seat.
Thanks.
Wow. I'm always struck by people that are skipping such a huge part of probably what your job is, just coming up with these insights, getting that strategy, educating people before they go out to do something and saying, here's what's going on, here's how we're thinking about this. And do you see that happening more and more, that people are skipping the strategic part, just jumping to do and make things and create stuff that just don't work like they should?
Well, I think we've been pretty lucky because the education, I've been in the design-centered world for about 7 years now. Came from systems integration and software design. And the thing that my team has been really instructive, and I think it's now a mainstream movement, we've been really instrumental in doing, is when we go from a really great demo or a really great proof of concept, and we start thinking about how we realize things, we're a part of the conversation with our partner firms that are working on engineering the particular systems, and they have really concrete questions about what's required. And that interface, if you navigate it correctly, is where you're able to inject those things because they're going to want to know, you have a fleet of cars, how are they being managed? What are they, if you're creating a set of autonomous systems, what are these other things that are there? And if you do your job right, then you end up with good results.
Where do you go, where do you start when you're about to go off and do something? Are you looking at things in a new way, or is this classic? Things that you've always done, the way that you listen, the way that you apply that knowledge and learning. Is the world and the way that we're planning and doing all these things, have they created new tools for you to be able to listen?
So I think you asked 2 questions.
I probably asked 4.
That's good. I'll answer 2.
Okay.
So the first one is kind of bread and butter to the people in this room, which is the design research and really basic analysis of what people are doing is called for. Aerospace and automotive examples, or industrial design examples, industrial robot examples. It isn't about a linear extension of what they did before, except you take a person away. We actually have to think about, all right, what is the objective here? How are we keeping the quality up and keeping people safe, and what is that all about? So that's the same. What we're really lucky now is we have simulations and numeric tools that allow us to do some of these things, like crowd simulators, or or things that maybe come from the architecture world or come from other kinds of system design world. And also, as I showed that chart early on, this using big data and using data analysis to really create rich models that designers can look at and interpret. They don't tell you what to do,
Right.
but they give you some ideas of what we would call like edge cases, or all sorts of black swan moments where you wouldn't necessarily anticipate that as part of normal user inquiry.
Do you, and everybody get ready with your questions. What gets you up in the morning? What gets you excited about coming to work today?
The lunch was really good. I put a bunch of bread in my bag. No, I think that we're really in an interesting place because a number of things have changed. When I finished college, I worked in telecom, and they always used to say the two biggest machines in the world are the telephone system and the electrical system. And we've run laps around that. Yeah. And the people in this room have run laps around that. And every day we're adding on to a really interesting story from an information, an application, a design, and all that stuff. And I don't think we've figured out what the impact on our culture is. And some of the videos we showed here, people are starting to do things that humans have never done. Mm-hmm. And we're getting to witness that firsthand. Right, in the labs and in prototypes and in our research and in conversations with our customers. I was telling Justin yesterday, 2 years ago, I thought we were kind of I was like, okay, I figure out, I think everything's kind of goes stepwise from here, but I don't think so anymore. I think we're at this new level. We call it big design, mm-hmm. where everything you do exists in a broader context, and you have to take that into account at some level, and that's it's all new. So that's really exciting for me.
That's cool. I mean, you work at a place where the ethos of your company, the way that you look at the world and the way that you do things are all based on these principles. And I think a lot of people in other companies are thinking that way. Mm-hmm. I think they go right to part two. And so what's it like working inside your building, that place? What are the people like? How are they thinking? How has that culture evolved over time? Give us a glimpse inside that place.
It's really frustrating. And I think it should be. I think it should be frustrating. Yeah. And I'll tell you why. Yeah. I think I graduated from college in '92. I have a set of skills that I got then, and I have things that I've learned at work. The tech and design and other people that I work with, we're all products of our education and our kind of history, and we're all we're going through a big change moment, and so it's when in stress we usually revert to training, mm-hmm. and I do that all the time, and that's not good. And I think my designer peers, they do the same thing. They're like, well, I just want it like this. I don't want to think about all these other things, and so that's one thing that we're constantly pushing against. Another thing is that. There's two more things I think are really interesting. One is I think there's a growing realization at Frog that creating really great experiences by creating really great products and services actually requires a really healthy organization to do that. And we're not good at that yet. Mm-hmm. So, everybody can go create a hero product, but we see those things go thud all the time. Whereas there are companies all around, within a 100-mile radius of here, including your own, they're continually churning out really great experiences because you have a seeming conveyor belt for that. Mm-hmm. That's because your organization is set up, you're design-centered, you understand the impact of software, you understand a lot of these things, and scalability, for example, is what you guys are famous for. Mm-hmm. And then the final one, I think, is one that's, if I can remember what it was, I think the final one is that I think we're all in a place where we don't necessarily know what the outcome is. And I think that's frustrating because I joked at the beginning about whether we're going to be food for machines or batteries or something like that. But we all have moments like that where we're wondering with the data that we're collecting and the systems we're creating, what kind of world are we creating? And I think people in this room are on the side of light. I think we're trying to create things that emancipate people. I think we're trying to create systems that are good, mm-hmm. But there's a lot of things that people can do with information that are similarly bad, and we have to make sure we don't design those things by accident.
Yeah, I think we're all lucky at Salesforce that everything we do, everything we create, comes back to a human being.
Right.
We're trying to create a connection between two people at any given time.
Right.
And so I think we're all blessed in that world where we get to work in high technology to be able to have that. But it's just been an eye-opening experience to watch all the other things working around that, because we're constantly then helping other companies connect their devices to other things. But I think famously, one of the things Mark said is behind every one of these connections is a customer,
right.
a person. And the moment we forget, and I think that's kind of what your talk's all about too.
That's right.
The moment we forget that is when we're creating something for what? We might miss that.
Well, and as my colleague Charlie says, where do you want your human in the loop? Mm-hmm. Just at design time? I don't think so, right? I think, I don't care who the smartest person in this room is. We can't anticipate everything. So we have to be in the loop at all points, especially, receiving the use value of what we're doing.
Excellent. How about some questions? Don't let me hog this.
And I think Warriors by 6, by the way. So, yeah. Just that, if that was the first question, yeah. Free Draymond.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Where are we up here?
Thanks for being here today. I want to start asking my question
Over here.
Where?
On the right top.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I want to start asking my question by defending the dude sleeping in his Tesla.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to drive one. So while the first few kind of weeks engaging with the car, when it's on autopilot, I had nothing to do.
Yep.
So I don't know if I should use the browser. I should check my phone. That sounds stupid. And then I need to admit that 4 weeks later, I had an accident because of it.
Yeah.
And probably just because I don't know the danger was coming, right? And then after that, I lost the trust with the car. And then I'm still crazy enough to use it continually. And then I found my problem is totally the opposite. I was like sweating all the time and holding the wheel, trying to not get killed, but still want to try the feature. Then the car didn't really get a nice job done too, to sort of help me, comfort me, or kind of give me a sense of now you should be proceeding with more comfort, or
Right.
it's more dangerous, or you should pay more attention. So I think when we are designing product that's more like dishwasher, the expectations are pretty set. So
That's right.
human-centered design has its sets of meanings. As we sort of technology and product approach is more kind of automated, intelligent phase, how do you sort of, when we think through the product, how do we approach the product design in a way to cope with this new human-centeredness?
Yeah, well, I would, that's a great question. And so, I my favorite thing out of this, working on this over the last year is the idea that watch the human, help the human. If this was my design team, a third of you would be watching the driver, right? You'd be once the product was in the market, let's just really not because we want to sell them something, let's just really watch what's happening, right? A lot of the work we're doing in automotive right now, which I can't really talk about, is around looking at the attention of the driver. Are they impaired? Are they sleepy? And this is not for self-driving, this is just for regular cars. Are they distracted? Are they having a heart attack? And that's actually a really great starting point, but I think the process is big. Being able to give yourself permission to say, oh, the design continues after the product's in the market, right? And take that fresh approach all the time, because people are going to come up with new uses, right? Or they're going to invent new behaviors that the engineers couldn't foresee.
Anyone else?
Got one here.
Oh, yeah.
So recently at an offsite for our leadership down in Palm Springs, we had an external speaker who was talking about the sort of myth of the free time, right? Machines and sort of all this stuff will like give us free time, and she questions sort of like, to do what? Like, we're gonna be standing in a field hanging out. Like,
right.
Humans actually like work, and it's not lost on me that when we talk about efficiency in helping our customers be more efficient, that largely means like there's less overhead. We're removing the need for humans.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about how we create efficiencies in ways that don't do that?
Well, I think we naturally. I disagree with the premise, because I think if you're in a boardroom conversation and I'm going to use the kind of language that I've heard, we're getting rid of heads. I think we are filling people up with things to do, and we are not, although in IT there has been no measurement of increased productivity. Like is it Solo's law, right? Productivity is everywhere but in the numbers. Like, we're doing all kinds of new stuff, but all this technology we've had in the last 30 years hasn't actually been the reason why. But to address your point, I think that there are lots of other things we end up doing. Right? I think if you're not cynical in a boardroom saying, let's get rid of 20% of operations, and you start saying like, how do we use these people in a different way to obtain better results, then you end up with something more. And people will, if they're well motivated, will find reasons why, because most of us are overloaded on a daily basis. And if we could actually spend time on the more high quality interactions, we would do better, right? I just think that's true. But we're so, especially to use a 20th century term, in the white collar world, we're so overloaded, right? That's been part of the economic recovery of the last 8 years, is that all of us are doing a job and a half now. We may be making more, but we're also, or not, but we're also doing a job and a half, and that's false economy, right?
Anybody else?
Hey, right here.
In the middle.
So you've talked a lot about designing things in a thoughtful, well-rounded way, sort of like looking at all of the different ways that things could go wrong or could go right that you haven't already thought about. As a company, do you take time to sort of play out those future scenarios even more? So beyond just the product and into the culture or into society, how that's going to affect, say, like 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line?
No, we should. I think we're all subject to our commercial models, right? And I think we do that in one part of our business, which is what's called social impact. And I feel like we should do that everywhere, because we think about what's the long-term effect of clean water on people, or all sorts of really good so-called humanitarian things. I think the window we have for lots of our clients is the commercial window that they give us, and that's part of, when you ask me about every day, like, part of the frustration is I think most of us, whatever role we play in creating new experiences, we want to follow those things, right? And we want to see them through to the next level, right? So we should be. I think there are organizations. I'm not going to say companies per se, but there are organizations that do that, but we don't do it enough.
I think that's all in kind of the follow through. I think people love the launch.
Yeah.
We love the pitch. We love the launch. We love putting it out there. And then that team, the people, the organization that loves to launch things, loves to move to the next launch.
Right.
And when you said you wanted to split up the room, you need to split up that team in order to iterate, refine, and make that thing you launched brilliant.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people, I don't know if you're seeing this too, that they just jump to the next thing and they don't make that thing they set out to make brilliant. They want to move to the next launch.
And it's a hard thing. It's a thing that we're taught. It's really sexy to be part of the big launch. It's also really, we also want the new. I think that there's in other cultures. I know I've done a lot of work in Japan, and there is a cultural at places like Nissan and Olympus. There's just a much more of a sense of pride in the long-term arc of the thing you're doing, right? And understanding how that changes, and sort of an appreciation for that. But that economy is under threat too. So
It is. One last question from the audience. Lauren.
I was wondering, you obviously have spent a lot of time studying systems. Do you have any examples of some unusual observations or starting points that you didn't expect?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think that I'm trying to think about this. There are all kinds of things that fall out that you don't expect. I think that let me think about. Wow. Okay. Not like big left of the decimal point stuff. Like I think one of the biggest things that I mean, you're not going to be happy with this answer. One of the things that happens all the time is things kind of go thud because they don't achieve I'm a physicist. They don't achieve the activation energy required. And we're like, oh, dude, if it was already going, it would be great, but it isn't going. And priming the pump, right? I feel like we oftentimes don't know what it takes to prime the pump. A lot of times nowadays, it's like number of users or data or, some kind of velocity metric, right? That's the thing I think, and I wish that we knew. Someone in the room worked with me on something that we launched a couple of years ago that got sideswiped by Slack, and we just didn't have critical mass, right? And, we didn't activate it. We didn't get over the hump. And I wish I knew where the hump was. Great.
Final word of advice to a room full of people that want to create great stuff?
Keep doing it. I think you wouldn't be here if that wasn't what you were doing or what you wanted to do. So, yeah, keep going.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Really great talk.
Thanks so much.
Terrific.